listening to the Jura Synchro Podcast with Tiia and Ria.
Hello everybody, welcome to Jura Synchro Podcast. Today we have a guest who is a nutritionist, Jessica G. Anderson. She owns a company named ATP Sports Nutrition and works with skaters and also the US military. So welcome Jessica, how are you?
I'm good, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, we're so happy that we got you here to talk about food, about nutrition and everything like that. So warm welcome. So let's get started. We would like to know a little bit more about you and your background, your education and work experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I am, as you had already mentioned, a sports dietitian for my own company where I actually specialize in figure skaters and do that part-time as a freelancer for any sporting organizations that I happen to connect with and reach out to. And then full-time, I'm working as a U.S. military performance dietitian civilian. But with that being said, I earned my Bachelor's of Science from Miami University of Ohio in Dietetics, Kinesiology, Health Promotion. I did my Master's at the University of Georgia, where I studied clinical exercise physiology with a certificate in obesity and weight management. I did my dietetic internship, which is basically the equivalent to a fellowship for a physician or so forth in a hospital through Sodexo in New York City. So I was on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And then I just earned my Certified Specialist in Sports Dietetics certification, which requires 2,000 hours of practice as a dietitian in the sports setting and 2 years experience this past November. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you have a lot of experience and we're so happy that you're here with us today to talk about it.
Yes.
So how did you get interested about sports nutrition?
Yeah, most of it was from my own experience. I feel like anyone involved in the figure skating community started when they were super young. So I was 3 years old and I was watching the Olympics on my mom's bed and I said I wanted to do that. And just through adversity with my own sports injuries, because I have had a ton, my friends and parents will tell me I'm an orthopedic mess, which yeah, I feel like the sport will do that to you, but overcoming those things nutritionally and just seeing the benefits of that from both a health standpoint and a exercise performance standpoint really inspired me to give back to the figure skating community. And that's truly where my heart is. And I'm continuing to overcome injuries right now, but nutrition plays such a vital role in that I just, to be able to make that my passion, like my work, my passion is something I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. So what's your background in synchronized ice skating?
Yeah, so I went to Miami University of Ohio and I competed on their junior team, their varsity junior team from 2010 to 2011. And I competed in Salzburg, Austria at the Mozart Cup, which was my first time representing the United States, was like a long life dream of mine. And then I also was on the collegiate varsity synchronized skating team at Miami my junior and senior year and helped lead the way to our 9th and 10th national title. So really, really cool.
I think we might have not compared in the Mozart Cup. I'm not sure at the same time.
Could be, I'm not sure.
We might have been in the juniors that time. Yeah. I'm not sure, but maybe. Yeah. So how do you support your skaters in their athlete career?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to connect with developing figure skaters anywhere from 4 years of age all the way up through retirement and anywhere in between. So currently, because I am in upstate New York and full-time as a U.S. military dietitian, freelancing through my company. And with COVID, it's kind of just been this way in general. A lot of what I do is virtual. So I will do team nutrition education talks through use of various virtual platforms. I'll do one-on-one nutrition coaching with individual ice skaters, specifically if they're injured or if it's general or performance-based. And then I'll develop educational resources as requested or if I feel like best fit, depending on the length of time in that contract or consultation period that I'm working with them.
Yeah. Do you have some certain teams or some certain skaters that you work regularly with, or is it just more like freelance based that anyone can call you?
This last year's kind of been a little wonky, and I feel like it's been that way for everybody. Just the season of synchronized skating or sport in general has been very interesting with COVID. So, I think that's benefited a lot of athletes in just fine-tuning their nutrition and their exercise training, but also being able to be a resource for them too. So last summer, and the plan is hopefully, I've been speaking to the coach, Adrian College varsity synchronized skating. They have a varsity figure skating team. So intercollegiate level, they have a senior team that competes across the world, and then their collegiate team as well, and then their open collegiate team too. I worked with them all through last summer, the postseason through the preseason, and then the season kind of got funky, but we're talking about meeting up again come the end of the next couple of months into the summer. And then I've also worked consultation-wise with a couple developing synchronized skating teams. So Kansas City Illusion in Kansas City, Missouri. They have a junior team, and then they have some younger, just like growth and development basic teams as well. And then intensity synchronized skating out of Ohio too.
That's
Perfect.
a lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I think it's good that teams and skaters in general use like nutritionists to help with their athletic career. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah.
And how many times do you usually have scheduled time with the team? Is once a week or once a month or?
Right. So I think it just depends on partnership, like what we decide to do in that time frame. So with Adrian, last May through August, I was seeing one-on-one ice skaters throughout the week, but then we would have team talks like once a week or every other week as well. So I was really busy, and it was fantastic to work with them, and I'm looking forward to continue to work with them too. But then I'll also just get teams that just want like some extra, since we're not competing now, like let's just do like some team nutrition education through virtual learning, since that's the new route to go. And in February, I had three or four different talks. I had 2 individual consultations and then 2 team presentations. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a mix and match, so to speak.
Yeah. If you have a one-on-one with somebody, how long does it usually take?
Yeah, so the initial one, I always say, like, it's like playing the game 20 questions, but I feel like there's actually 50 questions I have to ask because there's just so many components to our feeling and what we need and so forth. And I try to tailor it to what do they actually enjoy and what's going to be sustainable. Those are the 2 main things that I really want to consider. Otherwise, we're just not going to do it. But typically that first one-on-one consultation can be 60 minutes, and then the follow-ups can be anywhere from 15 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on the need.
The Jura Synchro Podcast.
So could you tell us a little bit like what are the basic fueling for a skater or athlete? What like a skater's basic diet, what should it look like?
Yeah, so unlike the societal influences, because there's a lot of influential factors that make us perceive food very differently, and unfortunately there's just too much information out there that's not correct. So being able to be that resource is helpful, but I always try to utilize the 3 pillars of like we want to fuel with carbohydrates in the form of a grain or a starch. We want to build with proteins or lean protein options from animal-based proteins, but we can also get them from beans and nuts and seeds and so forth. And then we want to protect with fruits and vegetables, because all those different colors from those foods are indicative of different vitamins and nutrients essential for both health and performance. But when it comes to the ice skater in particular, there are specific types of nutrients that are most important that we need to emphasize, just because they tend to lack in skaters' diets, or I guess you could say aesthetic sport too, like dancers, gymnasts, and so forth. So sufficient energy in the form of calorie, we just tend not to get enough. we don't necessarily realize just how much our body needs. Protein is another one. We just don't tend to get enough of that either as aesthetic athletes, as well as calcium and vitamin D. There's a lot of musculoskeletal injury, especially with the bone health and the tissue health, and then iron too, just because ice skaters in general, not everybody, but it's just very common that like we don't tend to eat a lot of red meat or sources of like biologically available iron. So
that's a good reminder for all of us to take those in mind.
And also think about the vitamins, because usually you always talk about the food and what you need, but sometimes you need to just think about the vitamins, where you can get them.
Yeah, definitely.
So should a synchronized skater's diet differ in the competition and in the training world?
Yeah, so just like your exercise training, and coaches do a good job of this too, of like periodizing, like when do we want to peak in our programs, right? We don't want to do that too early. We don't want to do it too late. So nutrition needs to match whatever the training demands are in addition to competition. So if it is an in-state or in-country local competition, then we're probably going to know like those foods and be really familiar with them. So it's good, but we do want to optimize our carbohydrate intake. And we just tend to not get enough of that, as mentioned before. So with that being said, people do respond differently and so forth. So not experimenting during competition. We want to make sure we're fueling with trusted, tried and true foods that we're familiar with. But if we're going internationally, then that can be just planning and preparing and understanding the environment in which you're going to be in, trying to stay away from anything that's raw or so forth, because our immunity and so forth, which might not be familiar with those foods, you don't want to cause upset stomach, but making sure we are consuming sufficient carbohydrates, because ice skating is considered an intermediate sport. So we have those quick motions, explosive, powerful movements, but then we have the steady state sustained movements too. So we're utilizing carbohydrates and we need them in our muscles so we can perform our best.
So at the competition weekends, we should really think of the carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates are going to be our best friend. And you think too, so, lack of sleep, we have adrenaline, we're excited about competing, like we have a lot of nerves going on, our body's going to be in a stress state, right? So we're going to be burning more fuel, we're going to be utilizing more of it too. And ice skaters like to dance and get ready to skate. So we're definitely going to use them at all times.
That's a good reminder that when you get the adrenaline, that you burn more calories. You don't even think about it when you're skating and competition in yourself. Yeah.
And usually the competition days are quite long, so you really need to think like when to eat and what to eat so that you can really go through the whole day. All right, so I want to ask about individuality, because in a team, for example, what you just said about competition days, that you need to really think when to eat and so, but sometimes, for example, during our careers, we ate chicken pasta most of the time, like 3 hours before the competition, and most likely it wasn't the best choice for everyone. So do you have any tips or any suggestions? How could we support individuality in a team, nutrition-wise?
Yeah, I think taking an assessment. So during the preseason, taking assessment of like, what are the needs? Do we have any dietary allergies or intolerances to food, and making note of those things and testing out foods that with the team in advance. Like I said, we don't want to be experimenting with things like before we enter competition, because we need to focus on our performance specifically. So that's going to be really important. But in terms of like the individuality, absolutely. So there is such thing as nutrient timing, and the closer we get to competition, the less fat and protein we want to consume, just because they take longer to digest and get into the intestines to be absorbed as energy for what we're doing. So, chicken pasta can be fantastic, like especially like a dinner the night before, but maybe if it's like less than 4 hours before competition, it can be a little bit heavy in the stomach. And then in addition to that, like the portion size too.
Yeah, I think it was heavy, and usually I had to eat a little bit less than usual because otherwise it would have been too heavy in the competition.
Yeah. But we always ate chicken pasta.
It's a good memory.
Yeah, it is also. What about, you talked a little bit how the competition and training days differ a little bit regarding the food. Do you have any ideas or tips? What should an athlete take with him or her to training days? If we have long training days, what kind of food to bring?
Yeah, I really like the shelf-stable handheld options that we don't really have to worry about, like the temperature, so forth. So, like I've actually created like a ice skating bag tag that has like the list of carbohydrates and proteins and things that you can take with you and the timing of them too. So, for example, with carbohydrates like dry cereals, granola bars, salted pretzels, saltine crackers, rice cakes, any of that kind of stuff, goldfish. And then for the protein, if you like lean, like beef jerky or turkey jerky, the little chicken or tuna packets, you could do cheese sticks or protein bars, depending on the type and so forth. Like those can be really helpful. Nuts and seeds. Trail mix is a really big one too. But having those things, and then in addition, if especially like when we have long training days, sometimes our appetite can kind of just be turned off, just because we're constantly moving and our body is stressed, and that can actually deter our appetite. So sports beverages, the regular types like Powerade, Gatorade, electrolyte beverages that contain carbohydrates are really helpful in just making sure we're getting the nutrients in, but drinking those calories and so forth can be a lot easier than having to like chew your food.
And I remember when we had like long training days, it was, at least I always like thought the day food-wise. I was like, do I have my breakfast with me? Then I have a snack. Then I have my lunch with me. What I'm gonna eat then? What I'm gonna have for dinner? You always had to think and pack all these food with you, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what do you think about fruit?
Fruit. I absolutely love fruit. Fruit's fantastic. It's an immediate energy source that has some good fiber and, like I said before, vitamins and minerals. And it's pretty shelf stable. I even like the squeezy applesauces, or even like, it sounds funny, but even like the squeezy baby food with the oats in it too can be a really great tool to utilize. So when you're in a pinch, yeah, I think those are really great. Mm-hmm.
Everyone speaks that you have to drink a lot of water. So what is your opinion of that?
Yeah, so that has been a big area where I've been helping a lot of teams work on their fluid intake. So if oftentimes if we feel like we're not sweating or like not that much, like then I just don't need water. Whereas like in the ice rink, especially depending on what ice rink you're in, because some of them are very cold, some of them are very warm. It just depends. But when we're in a cold atmosphere, that water is quickly being evaporated, so we don't recognize and realize how much fluid we are losing. So that's not a good measure of how much we need to consume. And ice skaters do tend to have a lower intake of water. So it definitely plays a role. And I feel like if I had to put on a pillar, like what comes first, like food or fluids or so forth, like water is going to take the gold star. Like we're not hydrated, those nutrients that we're consuming through our food aren't being readily carried into our muscle and our brain for fuel in terms of nutrients, and then also oxygen delivery too. So we can get early onset fatigue, excess muscle soreness, reduced training adaptation, and so forth. So yeah, fluid's going to play a big role. But to help kind of get around that, so a lot of times some people don't like the taste of water because it's flavorless. If we can improve, especially with exercise training, the palatability through adding a little bit of flavor, a little bit of salt to kind of drive that thirst, that can be really helpful in improving water consumption too.
And you spoke earlier about these like Gatorade or sport drinks. What do you think about those? Of course, water is the most important thing, but what do you think about those other fluids?
Yeah, so especially in like the preseason where training's getting ramped up a lot, both off and on ice skating. We're doing a lot in the summertime. I feel like you can be at the rink for like 8 hours. Having like a sports beverage containing that electrolyte fluid is really great. However, I do find that a lot of skaters are weary of the sugar content of Gatorade, Powerade, and that kind of stuff. So just education is a big component to that. But if they're not willing to consume like a sports beverage, there's other ways we can go to improve that. So whether it's like it sounds really funny, but a sports formulated like Jello, because Jello is actually considered a fluid. We can actually do that. Or if we have like these rehydrating packets that are like gels and then add some fluid to that through water, any way that we can like combine that carbohydrate electrolyte with water is going to be important. And it can be as simple as like salted pretzels with water too.
Yeah. And you said that some people don't like the taste of water. For example, I like to put like one lemon there, so it's easier to drink. So somehow.
Yeah. Do you think, is it possible to drink too much water?
Yeah, so you can actually become hyperhydrated. So ways that an individual can measure their hydration status is through urine color, urine frequency, and urine volume. So urine color, we want it to be like light yellow to pale yellow. Urine frequency, we should be using the restroom every 2 to 4 hours. And urine volume, it should be a strong, steady stream. If we're going more often than every 2 hours, then yeah, we're having too much fluid in the form of water, and we're just overhydrating our bodies and diluting our system.
What should an athlete consider if they are on a vegan diet or any other different diets?
Yeah, so a lot of the same nutrients that ice skaters are lacking you're going to find depending on the intensity of the vegetarian or vegan diet that they are consuming. And I'm always someone like, I am more than happy to work with you, whether it's from like an ethics standpoint or cultural thing. Like we will make anything work, but I do inform them like it's going to be more challenging and it's just going to require a lot more planning and prioritizing on their part too. But in particular with like vegan and vegetarian, we want to be making sure we're consuming sufficient amounts of like certain B vitamins, which are involved in like red blood cell production or formulation for oxygen delivery, in addition to iron, which plays a role in that too. The same thing with getting sufficient different types of carbs, fats, and proteins, in addition to the sufficient energy in the form of calorie. And also iodine. Iodine is important in helping to regulate thyroid function, and that's typically found in like our seafood, like seaweed and shrimp and tuna and cod liver. So if we're going vegan, it's going to be hard to get those things unless we're consuming like iodized salt, which in the United States tends to be pretty readily available. I'm not certain about your location. And then also calcium and vitamin D too. So very similar nutrients of concern to the ice skater, but a little bit extra, especially when it comes to iron and so forth.
Yeah, so it just requires a little bit more planning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you spoke earlier about that skaters sometimes don't get enough protein, for example. So what is your opinion about these nutrition supplements? For example, extra protein.
Yeah, so yeah, it depends like dietary intolerances, food allergies, culture, ethics, whatever it is with that athlete, it was why whether it's a team setting or not, it's very individualized. But I feel like, and a lot of dietitians too, like we want to make sure we're getting majority of our food, our nutrients through food first, and then we supplement second. So those convenience items like protein powders, protein bars can be absolutely resourceful to the athlete, especially with travel, or if they're away from home all day and they need to pack things. So yeah, but we want to make sure too that we're choosing dietary supplements that are safe, effective, pure, potent, and so forth. So helping them to assess and analyze the product label and making sure it's a safe one to utilize, especially if they are being drug tested.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, it is. We ate protein bars but for example, me, I didn't drink these protein shakes or anything like that. No. Yeah.
And I think we were very careful because we were scared that in any thing there could be something
that we don't know. Yeah, definitely. What about in general? What kind of impact does nutrition have for an athlete? Does it affect on performance or?
Pretty much everything. So when we think about food in my practice, dietitians wear many hats, from the clinical setting, improving chronic disease states, or if they have a surgery. And nutrition plays a role in the preparatory phases before you even have a surgery and accelerating that recovery process. Same thing with the training demands, and what are the performance goals? Is it time that we want these adaptations for like physically right now, or is it more so maintenance phase? So it's going to play a role hand in hand with whatever training cycle that we're in, as I mentioned before. And then also just the general nutrition too, and considering like the phase of the athlete's participation in sport. Like, are they nearing athletic retirement? Are they just starting? Or they're that adolescent growth and development phase? Just understanding and looking at the whole picture and making sure that we're not only optimizing their sport performance, but also their quality of life.
Tiia, Ria, the podcast.
Have you ever worked with skaters that have eating disorders?
So I have not actually. I think I did have one that was previously being seen by a psychiatrist for eating disorders, and there's actually some dietitians. It's very rare, at least in the States, that have like an actual certification as an eating disorder dietitian specialist, which requires additional time and having exposure and so forth. So typically if I have like a very severe clinical eating disorders case, like I know that's outside my scope of practice, so I will refer them out if available. But in terms of like disordered eating behavior, which is very much more broad span, I think that is a very common thing that we do find in the aesthetic sport world, but you'll also find it, I found it in a lot of other disciplines of athletics that I've worked in, including the tactical setting. And that kind of goes back to just like the messages that we receive on a daily basis, whether it's on our phone, through social media, or the news, and thinners, betters, that perception and so forth. So, I think no matter what discipline of nutrition you work in, you're going to get those cases, but understanding your scope of practice, and if you're able to help them, great, but trying to refer them out if you can too.
And I think we have followed you on Instagram, and you're doing a very good job, and you have a lot of good content on your Instagram also, but what would you say, how to build a positive relationship with food and eating?
Oh, thank you for those kind words. Yeah, I mean, it's been, I think a lot of what, like I said before, nutrition, I got into it because like of my own experiences with injury and ongoing things and how that has enhanced my quality of life and so forth. But I try to utilize that, and having been a competitive synchronized skater in particular, it's a very special and very different pool of athletes. Being able to connect with them in that way makes for a very safe environment where people feel comfortable to be vulnerable. In ice skating, we wear very slim outfits that expose our bodies, and there's that common thought process of what we should look like, even though there's truly is no standard for that. So a lot of what I utilize and what I've been doing is trying to get away from measuring parameters such as like our scale weight, or constant use of like body composition assessment, or food trackers, like trying to get away even from like our like smart watches and things like that, and how many calories. And like the cool thing about ice skating is that we are so aware of our bodies in space. That like if we can become more aware of our bodies in terms of like fueling and what we actually need and how food makes us feel and our relationship with that, then that is a much healthier way, not only from like a well-being standpoint, but also from like an athletic standpoint too, and that's going to be sustainable.
So I still want to ask, we have retired already a few years ago, but nutrition-wise, how to adapt to that change from going from athletic career to retirement?
Yeah, so, depending on the pathway in which we get there, so if we can plan for retirement and we know we're going to retire, utilizing at least like a year out and practicing and educating, like our bodies are going to change, like, and that's totally okay. Like our body's going to change throughout. If we're a skater, it's going to change throughout the whole season, but it's also going to change upon retirement. So preparing for that and helping them to develop life skills and understand like what is that going to look like and how is that going to differ? And I always encourage, because sometimes we tend to cling to our sport when we're leaving the sport itself or retiring, if we're planning for it, as mentioned before, of like, I need to keep skating like this. I need to keep exercising like this. No, you don't need to. And I always encourage, like, go on a foodie journey, go on an exercise journey, try new things that you weren't able to do before, and go exploring and going into that discovery mode and that phase, at least like in working towards retirement, is a safe and healthy manner in doing so, just so by the time retirement comes, then they feel more well prepared. However, if we have an athlete who has a very severe injury and they weren't planning for it, but now they can't, that's going to be a different scenario, and it's much harder, but we're going to work through the same process of that too. And they might require like extra care, potentially like counseling or some other forms as well.
Yeah.
I think you should have been telling us those words when we were quitting our careers.
Yeah.
That's very good said.
Yeah, I had the most difficult time myself. Like retiring from athletics in 2015, I ended up with 2 hip surgeries. So like I've been rehabbing and doing my own thing, and like, I wasn't planning for that. But like I said, going through it myself has just really helped to provide that to other skaters. So
when you have the own experience, it's much easier to help others. So I think that's great that you have that and help others through that.
Yeah, we still have one small thing. We have this or that questions. So this is a quick 5 questions. There's 2 options in each, and just pick either one quite fast. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Chocolate or ice cream?
Chocolate.
Circle or no hold element?
No hold.
Coffee or energy drink?
Coffee.
Veggies or fruits?
Veggies.
Spiral or spins?
Spiral.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jessica, that this or that went well.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
You guys as well. Thank you again for having me.
All right, so here in the end, we would like you to tell our listeners where they can find you on Instagram and how can they contact you if they need any nutrition services.
Yeah, definitely. My Instagram account is ATP Sports Nutrition. It stands for Achieve Top Performance. That's my my code, I guess, is what you call it. And then my company website is atpsportsnutrition.com.
All right, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Jura Synchro Podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. The musical theme of the show was created by Scatmix.pro and Carl Hugo.